So good evening and welcome back to the CEDAW and You discussion series. My name is Terry and we have been on this journey now for more than a month, actually 2 months. And we're so grateful to those of you who have stayed with us throughout the entire journey. And if you're joining us for the first time today, welcome from wherever you're joining us. So again, my name is Terry. I am with the CEDAW. I'm the founding director and convener of the CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, which is a non-governmental organization that focuses on the sustainable implementation of the mandates of the CEDAW Convention within a local context. We're here to preach about CEDAW, which we all love, and we feel very strongly that it is a rich treaty that most of our countries, if not 189 member states, have signed on to. And so it's our opportunity as citizens of these respective countries to remind our leaders that they have made an obligation as countries that have ratified this convention to ensure that equality and laws that provide equality under the law for women and men are in place. And so that is what we have been doing for the past 8 weeks. We have been talking and highlighting the substantive articles of the convention. Of course, the convention is made up of 30 articles, the first 16 of which are substantive. And so those are the articles that we have been focusing on and discussing. Today, we will discuss Article 15, CEDAW and the law. And with us to discuss that article, we have a number of guests. And I'm very excited that they're already coming in. So welcome, Cheryl. And I know that we have more guests to follow. But before we get to our guests, I do want to say a few words of thank you to our co-sponsor, our partner in this, who has been the British High Commission, for affording us the opportunity to be able to carry this series live on Instagram and have it brought out to you. And I want to also thank you all who have been on this journey with us for those past weeks, and continue on today. And hopefully will join us next week for the last exciting installment of this series. Thank you all for being with us and taking this journey, especially on those bumpy roads where we had some technical hiccups, but you stayed with us and we appreciate that. And last but not least, of course, I want to thank all of our staff, our volunteer staff, I should say, our communications folks who have been doing tireless jobs behind the scenes to ensure that every week we got the information out properly, we got our guests lined up, and of course our guest presenters or discussants who have also been on this journey with us. So thank you all for just being who you are, for seeing the value in the work that we continue to do at the CEDAW Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, and your willingness to join us, to learn, to grow, because that's what we're about. We're about learning and growing and collaborating. And the fact that you are always willing to join us to do that, we are eternally grateful. So with that, I will say a welcome again to our guests, Shelley and Sherwan. And I am also going to say a welcome to our host, our hostess, who is looking all around, but we want to welcome back Jackie. If you will recall, Jackie was with us a couple of weeks ago, and we're welcoming Jackie back again today to have the discussion around CEDAW and the law. And with Jackie, two special guests, and I will let Jackie introduce her guests, and I will turn it over to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Techno peasant again on the laptop and here and can't get it right.
But you're here.
I don't know.
We're seeing you and we're hearing
I'm here.
you. So you're batting 1,000
Yeah,
right
you're
now.
hearing me.
We're seeing you and we're hearing you. So you're all
Okay.
good. You're good to go. Let's go.
So let me see if I could relax myself. Oh my gee. Thank you very much, Terry, and
Sherilyn?
thank you to Cheryl and Ms. Dalabai for being with us this afternoon. And as I was saying to you all earlier, it's a conversation. It's not your academic forgetting your law degree. And so let me stop playing the fool. So let me just introduce two really beautiful and accommodating souls who have, walked with me over this couple of weeks of a lot of psychedelics. So, and if you have the same view as I do, on the top right is Ms. Sherilyn Peters, who is the legal officer one at the EOC, the Equal Opportunities Commission. She, before being at the commission, she was an associate attorney at Chambers dealing with matters of public, constitutional, and civil law. Prior to joining the legal fraternity, my girl spent 10 years managing business development, marketing, and administration. So she has a gamut of skills. She can interchange anywhere you put her, she can fit. Very good. I like people who are around it. So Ms. Peters is holder of a legal education certificate, LEC, from the Hugh Witton Law School, an LLB from University of London, and a BA with honors from business management from University of Sunderland. And here to be her riding partner is Ms. Shelley Ann Dalabai, who is also at the EOC, and she is the corporate communications manager.
Yeah.
Right. I just fly out of something and fly and grab this. I've been reading it all morning, but Right, so Shelley provides high-level support to the commission, and when we say high-level, I saw Sherry operate the other day. You're good. So in the whole area of marketing and communication, she's ace there. She spearheaded information subunit of the court protocol information unit. She's was a senior corporate communication officer, the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan Secretariat at the THA. Leave too soon, girl. I have plenty work to do. Shelley is a member of the Public Relations Association of Trinidad and Tobago. She's also a former journalist, and I think that's where I know the name, at the Express. She graduated from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and she has a Master of Marketing, specializing with distinction, which she got from the Arthur Lockjack, and that's another place. Once it passed through Arthur Lockjack, name change every 10 years. We have someone of very good caliber here with us today. So,
All right. Okay. All right.
Ms.
So, all right.
Dalabai,
So, Ms. Burgess, I'm going to say something now based on what you just said. I think any school you pass through in Trinidad and Tobago, you have someone of good caliber, not just ALJ. I'm just saying. Okay. I'm just saying. Go ahead. Continue.
If on the paper was School of I just say the same thing because we all go to every school we have in Trinidad and Tobago. Why I think people send the children from all over the place to get educated here.
There you
We
go.
all good.
There you go. There you go.
That we really do. So no, but let's get down to the really business of the evening, afternoon into evening, and we're here to talk about Article 15 of the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence to
Discrimination.
Women.
Discrimination against women.
The discrimination against women. So I want to go first to Ms. Dollaby, and if she could just give us a sense of how does the EOC operate, whether they, if they have a strong leanings to the CEDAW and what is in the convention, but from your line of work, how can you connect the EOC and the convention?
Thank you for that vibrant introduction, Jackie. And I just want to point out as well, because it's a name that a lot of people get wrong. It's the Equal Opportunity Commission, not Opportunities Commission, right? And I just want to set the context just a bit and tell you the work of the commission, what we do, and about the act just a bit. And I think when I develop that point, you'll get a sense of just how we connect in terms of sex discrimination. Right, so the Equal Opportunity Commission was established by the Equal Opportunity Act, and our mandate is to work towards the elimination of discrimination and the promotion of equality and good relations between persons of different statuses. So the Equal Opportunity Commission, the Equal Opportunity Act, actually seeks to protect persons against discrimination as it relates to 4 broad categories, right? And these are employment, education, the provision of goods and services, and the provision of accommodation, right? So under the Act, persons are entitled to equality and fair treatment despite their status ground, or what we sometimes call inherent characteristics. And then we also cover 7 status grounds, which are race, ethnicity, religion, marital status, origin, including geographical origin, disability, and sex. Right? So the status ground, it must be tied to category covered by the Act. So, for example, if a woman tries to purchase a car part, and she goes to the auto parts or supply shop, and they refuse to sell her the parts because she's a woman and they don't think she knows anything about parts or mechanics and so on, she can lodge a complaint at the EOC claiming discrimination on the status ground of sex, and then tie it to the category of provision of goods and services. So you see how the status ground must be tied to a category for them to lodge a complaint at the EOC, right? And according to the Act, some of our functions are to educate the public. So we do that through advocacy and outreach or educational programs. We prepare and publish appropriate guidelines to the avoidance of discrimination. It's on our website, shameless plug, www.equalopportunity.tv. And we also receive, investigate, and as far as possible, conciliate allegations of discrimination. So anybody who believes that they have been subjected to discrimination based on the status grounds and categories covered by the Act, they can lodge a complaint by us, and we are mandated to investigate it. And all our services up until the stage of conciliation are free of charge. So our public education programs, coming to us for legal advice, and so on.
Great.
Thank you very much. And just to let you know, I was close to one of your former chairpersons, and I'm tired here. I have to tell people it's not that observation that you made, right? And I feel so thanks for the correction. I always smile when she had to tell people it, so now I get it. So, thank you very much. So I want to go on to Sherilyn, our legal. And before I do, let me just bear with me a minute while I read the Article 15 so that for the other people in the audience who may not be on top of it would hear what it says at Article 15. Right? So it says, state parties shall accord to women equality with men before the law. State parties shall accord to women in civil matters a legal capacity identical to that of men and the same opportunities to exercise that capacity. In particular, they shall give women equal rights to conclude contracts and to administer property, and shall treat them equally in all stages of procedure in courts and tribunals. State parties agree that all contracts and all other private instruments of any kind with a legal effect which is directed to restricting the legal capacity of women shall be deemed null and void. And state parties shall accord to men and women the same rights with regard to the law relating to the movement of persons and the freedom to choose their residence and domicile. And we're seeing a lot of equality under the law, a lot of opportunities, the things that you're part of your mandate, looking for the discrimination. Tell me, Cheryl, how does this jump out to you, and how do you see yourself either in well, in this case, in your capacity of where you work, but probably you may have to speak outside of a work situation. If something like this, someone comes to you, or maybe just relating that they're being discriminated in a sense like this, how is it that you can deal with something like that?
Okay. Good afternoon. Hi, Terry and Jackie. Thank you all for having us. So, as we know, and maybe I shouldn't start with that, for the viewers especially, the convention provides the basis for realizing equality between men and women. And it does this by ensuring that women have equal opportunities, so access to equal opportunities. So what it does is it requires that countries eliminate discrimination against women in the public as well as in the private sphere, including the family. And so that it recognizes that gender roles and stereotypes must be eliminated so that there isn't any form of discrimination against women or girls. So as it relates to Section 15, you would have mentioned the 4 sections. And just to summarize it, it is that men and women be treated equally. And in a document, I think it was the reservations to CEDAW, and this was an analysis that was done for UNICEF by Marsha Freeman. They went into Article 15 and they put it quite simply that it goes to the heart of the legal capacity of women and the recognition of their rights to make decisions on their own for their families and to inherit and own property. And it is recognized as one of the key articles of the CEDAW Convention as it relates to equality of women to also enter into contracts and own property. But as it relates to the Equal Opportunity Commission, our focus will be on Section 1 of the article, which relates to according equality to men and women before the law. So, go ahead, Terry.
No, I'll let you finish. I have a question, a follow-up question.
Okay. So the 2 core concepts that come out of CEDAW aligns with the mandate of the Equal Opportunity Act in that there is promotion of equality and there is the prohibition of discrimination. So the concept of equality as is enshrined in the CEDAW recognizes rights of women as equal to men and equality in the convention as substantive equality. And under the Equal Opportunity Act, which is a progressive piece of legislation, we aim to promote equality and promote opportunities between individuals of different status grounds, as Shelley would have mentioned. And it just simply means that there should be equal access to opportunities for individuals so that they could compete on equal terms and basically have a level playing field. Somebody should not be disadvantaged because of one of the inherent characteristics that Shelley would have mentioned, particularly because of being male or female, which is what sex refers to under the Equal Opportunity Act. In addition to the concept and the principle of equality under CEDAW, how it also aligns with the Equal Opportunity Act is with non-discrimination. Because the Act prohibits discrimination under the categories and status grounds that Shelley would have spoken about. And Article 1 of CEDAW defines discrimination. And it states, and I'm going to read here, that discrimination against women shall mean any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on a basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. So the key words here are distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of sex. And while the Equal Opportunity Act does not have a specific definition in relation to discrimination, it is referred to as less favorable treatment towards an individual based on one of the inherent characteristics that Shelley would have mentioned. Sex under the Equal Opportunity Act refers to male or female, as I would have mentioned, and that has to do with the biological and physiological characteristics that would define male or female, so that a person's identity would be based on their physical characteristics. So, for example, their reproductive organs, hormones, genes, etc. So, sex discrimination under the Equal Opportunity Act, therefore, would be concerned with the differential treatment that somebody receives because of their sex, because of being male or female. And, for example, this would be like, I'm performing the same job as my male employee, but I'm receiving half the salary that he's receiving, or I received the discipline or a warning letter for something that I did, but somebody of another sex, being male, wouldn't get punished for it. So it would be less favorable treatment based on being female or male under our Act. So sex under the Equal Opportunity Commission, under the Equal Opportunity Act, would be covered under these four categories that Shelley would have spoken about. With respect to CEDAW, we know that there is focus on both sex and gender. And just to clarify for viewers, again, that sex is a biological difference. And according to the concluding observations in the combined, and I'm reading again here, in the combined 47th periodic report of Trinidad and Tobago, which was done in 2017, the term gender was defined with respect to socially constructed identities and attributes and roles for women and men and society's social and cultural meaning for those biological differences. So gender, therefore, is more or less social attributes and opportunities associated with being male or female, and what is expected of men and women in terms of being masculine or feminine, or how you're supposed to behave as a man or as a woman. So what we wanted to point out that while the Act refers to the term gender under one of our sections, Section 7, gender is not a recognized status ground under the Act.
Yeah.
So just to recap and summarize, the Act prohibits discrimination, which is recognized under CEDAW as a core principle. So we align like in that manner, as well as with respect to the promotion of equality between individuals. The primary task of the Commission is to oversee the Act and ensure that there is no inequality or discrimination occurring. And how we do that is we receive complaints, investigate, and we will take it up to the point of conciliation so that any member of the public can come in and lodge a complaint with the commission as it relates to the 4 categories, and for the sake of this afternoon's session, the status of sex. So all of the services that are offered by the Equal Opportunity Commission are free to the public.
Okay.
And
So let me ask you to pause there for a second. And if I may, Madam Burgess, if I may ask a question. Is it safe?
I have one too. So go ahead.
Is it safe to say that the Equal Opportunity Act was put in place based on the recommendation from the CEDAW Committee after a review was done, or is it out of, or based on the Articles 1, 2, 3 of the CEDAW Convention, which encourages states to put the proper infrastructure in place to ensure that equality is available, or put the proper structures, institutions, I should say, structures and institutions in place to in respect to equality for women, men, boys, and girls, because the act was not something that was always there. So that's my first question. Did the act come into play based on the CEDAW Convention? Yes or no?
No, prior to the implementation of and creation of the Equal Opportunity Act, the only thing that was in place was the Constitution. And what was recognized is that the Constitution, equality is also enshrined in the Constitution, but with respect to the Constitution, all you can do is bring a constitutional motion against the state, which is just the only avenue. But with respect, so that privately you couldn't do anything. For private entities, you couldn't. So, and there was some of the status grounds that weren't covered. So the Act, as we were saying before, is a progressive piece of legislation. So it moves with society, and we are still calling for amendments to be made because there are always changes as it relates to discrimination and equality in society. So I think it was born out of the lack, for want of a better word, or the Constitution not being able to cover everything, and
so the lack of an avenue for the average citizen to address issues, as opposed because they that's it. However, are you calling it a progressive piece of legislation? And maybe at the time it was progressive because there was nothing else there. But fast forward to 2020, when we talk about the Act, and I do think it's a strong piece of legislation, but I'm wondering also, however, if it does not need to now be expanded or updated, because you speak of sex and not gender, and gender being a social construct. In order for one to be fully realized as a human being, they have to be accepted, or their gender has to be accepted along with their sex, right? Male, female, and whatever gender pronoun that person subscribes to. And so if the Act eliminates or does not recognize gender, it actually is still operating in a limited fashion. So, and I think I heard you subtly admit to that in your exchange, which is fine. But I'm just wondering your perspective on that and how that would be addressed. For instance, if a non-binary person brings a complaint to the commission, how will that be addressed? How will that be addressed?
Thanks, Terry. Sure, I know you want to take that so badly. Let me just get a little piece in before you take it. There is actually a provision in the Equal Opportunity Act that allows the Commission to make recommendations for amendments to the Act, right? So as Cheryl was mentioning before, and I think the thought behind it was that, as society evolves or progresses a particular way, that the Act will be able to keep up. And so there is that function in the Equal Opportunity Act where it says that we can make recommendations to the Attorney General to amend the Act, and we have done so, because I want to agree with you that we need to get some of those recommendations in. Right, we need to have some amendments to the Act, and so that's why we made those recommendations. So let me give it back to Cheryl so she can go into into what some of those recommendations were.
Yes, and what I wanted to point out to Terry, with respect to constitutional motions, you always have to get an attorney to file a constitutional motion, so it becomes very costly as well. Again, all of the services of the Commission, wherein you can bring on complaints against the state or private institution, are all free up to the point of conciliation. So from inception, and particularly since 2014, we have been advocating for amendments to the Act. And I know that the Shadow Report, I believe, of 2016 went into sexual harassment as being one of the recognized offenses that they needed to implement into some of the laws to start dealing with. And we have currently a matter before the Court of Appeal as it relates to sexual harassment, so I don't want to get into it too much. Sure. But we have some of the proposed amendments include sexual harassment as a form of discrimination. And what we wanted to have, because we have been dealing with complaints up until this point, we have been, before it went to the Court of Appeal, we were dealing with matters of sexual harassment. So we wanted, for clarification, that sexual harassment would be codified into our Act, that there would be a proper definition of sexual harassment, and then that there would be a duty on employers to promulgate a policy so that every organization would ensure that they have a policy in place as it relates to sexual harassment. So that was one of the amendments. We also had to include sexual orientation, HIV, the expansion of disabilities, including cohabitation and half-blood relations. And we also keep revising. So we have this in, but we also have discussions as it relates to things that we also need to keep making recommendations for. So as it stands, we could only deal with the grounds and the categories that are covered under the Act, but we are also really, really lobbying for some amendments to be made to the Act. So that is how we're trying to deal with it right now. And that is why I say it is a progressive piece of legislation. And while I understand from inception to now not much has happened, we are trying our best to make sure that we get the necessary amendments to include other categories and status grounds.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that explanation, a very comprehensive explanation. Of course, we have to remember that this is and this is why I'm enjoying these conversations so much, because we're talking within the context of Trinidad and Tobago, of course. There may be other people who may be logging on from other parts of the world that may not even have an Equal Opportunities Act in their where they live, right? And so they may only have to rely on the CEDAW Convention as a way of holding the state, their state accountable for ensuring equality as they go forward. So I appreciate that very comprehensive explanation, and it also sheds light on the type of the type of progressive work that has been done in our little small island developing state. In some ways, yeah. I mean, I think it does, and we need to recognize the progress that we have made as a country, but we also, as well as highlighting the gaps that still exists And
recognizing, highlighting, and trying to put forward the necessary things in place to get it changed.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, very good.
So let me get a word into edgewise piece, and any one of you can jump in. I'm hearing so many good things, but do people know about it?
Do people know about the Equal
The
Opportunity
general
Commission?
public,
Um,
yeah. Are we aware that all this is happening, or we have these opportunities to come to you to correct some of these things?
I think it's a work in progress. To be honest, we do a lot of advocacy and educational programs. We go into organizations and we offer inclusivity training and also we assist them in developing their policies, such as their sexual harassment policies. We engage with partner organizations to magnify their cause for justice. Very soon we're going to have a roundtable discussion entitled Words Can Hurt, where we'll be looking at the role and impact of language on women and girls. Just name a few initiatives. So we're trying I mean, we're all limited because of the pandemic. We can't be out and about the way we would have liked to in terms of our outreach, being physically able to interact with people. But we definitely are trying via our social media, mass media, and working with partners as well to try and get word out as much as possible. So we are on the ground, so to say, and we really are pushing forward because as part of our functions, right, we also are responsible for educating the public, right? So I think the way the act is made up, it's like we're handling discrimination from both ends, right? So we're looking at redress for discrimination that exists, right? And that's via our complaints process. So if you're discriminated against, you come in and you lodge a complaint. We try to conciliate the matter. And then you have the public education aspect where you raise awareness so we can move towards a society or, an ideal of equality.
Excellent.
So tell me something. If I've been discriminated against, I can just walk into your place and lodge a complaint, or do I have to make a stop first? Do I have to go by the police, don't get any redress, and then I say, all right, well, I ain't able to tell you, I'm going by EUC. Can it be, do I have a walk-in?
You can't walk
it
in, yes, but we're actually trying to encourage people to use our email, right? So you can send an email to complaints@euc.gov.tt, or you can go onto our website, www.equalopportunity.gov.tt, because we're really trying to push the digital trust right now, because we're really trying to limit exposure at the office. But it is possible to walk in. You don't have to go through any third parties. It doesn't matter what other arrangements were in place and so on. You come and you access us, and we're extremely accessible. As we were mentioning. Oh gosh, I see you pointing at me.
I really like that last thing you're saying, that you don't need to go to a third person, a third party, because if I have a sexual harassment, well, we have no laws against sexual harassment, so it will go to court under some other psychedelic name that might describe it properly. Could I forget them and come straight to you? Because I have been harassed. I'm not getting redress, and this man who harassed me, he prim and proper there watching me in my face every day. Could I come to you to get rid of this man, to attend to this situation for me? Because I hurt it real bad.
Yeah. Cheryl, you want to take it?
As I said just now, Jackie, I don't want to get into sexual harassment too much, but the complaints process is such that if you have a complaint that you want to make, it has to fall under the category and the status ground, and it is just a matter of filling out a complaint form and lodging it at the commission, and then an investigation will be lodged, because we investigate all matters that come before us. So you don't need an attorney or anything like that. And if it is in employment and you already have a union matter, you can still lodge the complaint. You can do it concurrently. Also, we encourage people to try to get redress within the organization before lodging a complaint, but you can do it while you are doing that as well. Because one of the first questions we will ask the employer, and in fairness to the employer, we would ask, were you aware and what did you do? So you also need to be, there needs to be balance, so you have to be fair to the employer as well. So you can do it concurrently, internally at the commission, and we will investigate it once it falls under the category and status grounds of the Act.
Right. I want to add, sorry, and thank you for that also. That's actually a very comprehensive approach. But I would also add that I recall several years ago, maybe 3, 4 years ago, the Equal Opportunity Commission was very instrumental in crafting a recommendation of a sexual harassment policy that it was a draft, and it's not in law anywhere, but it was a draft policy, and then it was, of course, recommended to the government, but also more importantly to private sector. And I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest, several organizations in Toronto, many have since done some work around this sexual harassment policy, which was influenced by this draft policy that came out of the EOC. So I just want to put that out there and help me keep me honest. Let me know if that is accurate or not.
Yes, it is. What we also, under pursuant to Section 27, in addition to the public outreach, we also provide guidelines to organizations that would be helpful to the public as well as employers. So we did guidelines. It wasn't a policy per se, as it relates to sexual harassment. And you are correct. It was very comprehensive, and we covered a lot of the legislation that may touch on sexual harassment, but we went into the various forms, what it constitutes, we defined it, and everything like that. And we did a lot of public outreach as it relates to sexual harassment and the guidelines. So, and what we were offering and what we continue to offer is that we review policies as it relates to harassment and discrimination in the workplace. So a lot of organizations decided when we did the public outreach that they needed to implement things like that to safeguard themselves and to ensure that their employees were okay. And they recognized that zero tolerance should be had in organizations for something like sexual harassment. So a lot of work was done on it. It was highlighted, and a lot of policies came out of it for organizations, which we also were instrumental in amending and rolling out. So yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to take away your thunder, Jackie, but we are approaching 6:30, and so maybe we can hear from all of you where we are as a country as it pertains to the Article 15, and how are we doing, and whatever else Jackie wants you to ponder as we wind down.
I was just about asking you, you know, what in terms of timing, how much time we have again, because you know, I would have liked to just share with EOC the recommendations coming out of the last presentation of CEDAW, the 4th to 7th.
The review, the last review in 2016, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it may not be under their remit, and but they probably are aware of it. But again, for general, if you could indulge me to just read 3 recommendations that you know, came to our country, and I think it's something that, whereas we may not be, that's illegal, whereas whereas
she's a lawyer by osmosis tonight.
the people to whom it's addressed, I hope that, you know, they are working feverishly when we do present again, that there is some kind of update as to where the country is on these recommendations. So bear with me a little
Sure.
bit. So it says, the committee recommends that the state party A clarify the cooperation and mandates of the Interministerial Committee on Gender Equality, the National Commission on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, and the departmental gender focal points with the Gender and Child Affairs Division to ensure effective coordination. B, continue to provide adequate resources for gender-related activities and ensure that the gender division within the Gender and Child Affairs Division has adequate human and financial resources to effectively undertake its activities, including gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting. And C, to assess the impact of the move of the national machinery for the advancement of women to the office of the Prime Minister, with a view to ensuring that it can effectively discharge its mandate and provide in the next periodic report precise information on the budgetary allocation for the Gender Affairs Division that incorporates allocations for both recurrent expenditure and development programs. I know for a fact that that division is not well staffed so that these things can happen. So I am hopeful by the next submission that these things are really in place, or we are well on our way to having them in a way that people could really benefit from that entity, the Gender Affairs Division. That whole thing we talk about, gender focal points, gender budgeting, those things are so necessary for us as a country, for us attaining gender equality. So, you know, it's something that we have to keep our eyes and ears tuned into as to how things are moving and what is really happening for us to really don't get buff again. We don't need to see something in writing like this for us to do the right thing.
And Jackie, you might want to do a definition of buff, because everybody may not know what that is.
All right. Yeah, but you know, it's really serious. You know, that the Gender Affairs Division and Gender and Child Affairs Division is really a strong place where, because women ain't fixed up yet. I keep saying women ain't fixed up yet, and we have to have some kind of, you know, liaison, some kind of partisan, some kind of allyship. We on the outside here who are doing the advocacy work need to be partnering and strongly partnering with the gender, because I am sure, I am convinced, I know the government can't do everything. They need civil society to partner with them, to collaborate with them. I know as well that the Gender Affairs Division have a number of civil society organizations as their partners, and we're here to serve them, but they have to, you know, show that they have the oomph and they want to do it.
But you're making a point that I don't want us to lose the point that you're making, which it's not just the Ministry of Gender Affairs and Child Division. It's institutions like the EOC that has a role to play, and quite pivotal role at that, and can guide policy. They may not be able to set policy for the country, but they can certainly influence and guide.
Listen,
so I think you're making a very good point.
Yeah, I know they hear me. I don't want to tell them that to pick it up because their name not here. So I call it name here. But of course they have a role. If they can see that, you know, the necessity in something like this. If what they are doing, if they can come to terms with that gender aspect, because right now they're dealing with sex, come to terms to incorporate that gender aspect, then we have that kind of balance and that kind of buy-in, so that, you know, the work continues in a kind of seamless way, that the genderized people on the outside know that you are partners too. So, you know, degree by degree, that
and to be fair to the EOC, I mean, from my vantage point, I've always seen them, at least for the last 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, been very close allies with women's organizations and grassroots organizations, and advancing the work of and the equality for women, and so I have to give them credit for that. I also have to say, that there still needs to do better. There's more work to be done, and none of us can relax, and all of us need to be partnering with each other on critical issues, and sometimes not so critical issues, so that we are advancing these ideals, so that we are not talking about these things as oh, by the way, this should happen, but that we are seeing that it's now, these things have happened, they are normalized, they're part of our infrastructure. And one thing I want to touch on very quickly, because I know you all probably have some time constraints as well, and that is the fact that we don't have an international institution that deals with our international treaties. And I know at one point that might have been something that the EOC might have been positioned to take on because of the nature of the EOC. I'm not trying to give them more work, but the fact is that there's that need to have that focused approach to ensuring that not just CEDAW, but all of the treaties that our government have signed on to is addressed in the manner in which, and given the type of focus that it's required, so that we can stand as a country proudly and indicate how well we're doing to implement these mandates that we have so readily signed on to, within the context, and I'm emphasizing that, within the context of our local culture. So yeah, I want to just pass that ball back to you all at the EOC.
Well, I would have mentioned that we don't cover gender, but we try to do our best, even though our hands are tied. So, for example, we have collaborated with institutions as it relates to gender-based violence, as you would know, and we have made recommendations for amendments to the Domestic Violence Act as gender-based violence. So we, as I would have stated, we could make recommendations to various legislations, even though it may not relate us in terms of us not having gender specifically as a status ground. We still recognize it as something that needs to be addressed. In addition to that, with respect to the National Policy on Gender Development, which I think was adopted in 2018, I could be wrong with the date, which provides a framework for the strategic and effective integration of gender perspective, we also made recommendations as it relates to that policy. And I don't know, Jackie, I think you would be aware of the Gender Coordination Group of various organizations having the focal points, and they meet to discuss different events and action items and recommendations as it relates to gender-related issues. So we are a part of all of that, despite the fact that we don't specifically cover gender. So we are trying to do our part in relation to gender as well.
Yes, until the laws catch up.
And we can encourage the law to get caught up, right? We all can encourage, because the law is not going to do it by itself, right? It's people who's going to influence that laws be changed and advanced. So it's us people who have that real power to influence that. And so we all need to be doing that in our respective spheres. But Jackie, it's your court.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the time, and I think we had a good stretch. I want to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon into evening and giving of your time and your knowledge, your scholarship, your understanding of what we are trying to do on this end. And and I really see the EOC as a adjunct to us as civil society, and there are a number of things we can do together. We have been doing things together. If I remember rightly, we had a very nice radio series at one point,
Yes.
and we can try something like that again. Or maybe another thing, this conversation, this could be part of how you get your word out and how we get to be more in sync with what you're doing and understand what you're doing and your limitations, because you do have some limitations. While we might be wanting to pull you to go further and faster, you have some limitations that we have to understand, but we can still work together under the constraints. But I really want to thank you for being here today. And this road was long, eh? So,
Thank you for having us.
thank you very much. And until we meet again, Terry, thank you. The other people who are listening, thank you for tuning in. And
Before we leave, I just want to remind people that next Wednesday at 5:45, we will be discussing Article 16, which is CEDAW and the family. And that should be, and it actually will also be the last substantive article we discuss in this discussion series. So I hope you all come back and join the conversation. It should be a very interesting conversation. So let's all come back next Wednesday at 5:45.
Just one more thing before we leave. The guidelines that we would have spoken about, they are all free to download on our website. So, and there are a wealth of information on the various categories and status counts. So feel free to go download them.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
sure.
Thank you.
All right. Stay safe, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Don't forget to come back next Wednesday, same time.
That is not a thing to miss.
No, you don't want to miss this. Bye.
Bye. Bye.